question list, but I always like to start with just an introduction and a little background on you and who you are and kind of what
Okay.
brings you to the podcast.
Okay. You want me to start now?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So, my name is Scott Massey. I've been a PA for 36 years. I've been a PA educator for, this is my 29th year. And just to kind of make a long story short, I've been in leadership positions in 4 PA programs. I've also been an active researcher over the years in terms of presenting and publishing research, in particular about predictive factors for success in PA education. So a couple of years ago, Exam Master had approached me. Actually, the executive of Exam Master came to one of my presentations and asked me if I would be interested in participating in this exciting project, which is developing and launching this PA admissions exam. But he asked myself and Dr. Jenny Yaley to be the co-investigators of this project, as there will be about an 18-month research component for that. So that's kind of like, I won't go into everything else. As far as my PA career, I've worked in numerous settings, including more emergency medicine than anything else, but I worked in family practice. I worked internationally for a year, and I've worked in several countries around the world participating in projects as well. But at this point in time, I'm focusing on research and education, and the other part of my time is spent working on this project. So that's just kind of a summary of me.
A little bit of everything, but sounds good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm really interested, and I'm going to be perfectly honest. I am not exactly sure what my thoughts are on the PACAT, so I'm excited to learn more. I think I've been a PA for 5 years now, and I think if I was in the pre-PA shoes, I would maybe be a little bit terrified. But as someone who's kind of been through it and helped a lot of students through the process, I can see the benefits of a test that is designed like the PACAT to be more specific than, say, the GRE. And so, yeah, I'm excited to hear more and kind of see if it helps my thoughts on it a little bit more. So it wasn't your idea, you just got involved. Is that safe to say?
I was asked to be one of the principal investigators. So, when you launch something of that magnitude, there has to be some robust research. So the exam was launched in a research phase in 2018, and it has been administered to over 2,000 students, both who are freshly matriculated into PA programs and also those that are in interview phase. So obviously we can't ethically, because this has to be approved by an institutional review board, we can't ethically administer this exam to pre-PA students, that in case it would provide any kind of people would use it for any purpose other than, basically making decisions. So up until now, it's been in the research phase, and that will continue going forward as well. As far as what you kind of mentioned about the concern of the pre-PA students in terms of GRE versus PACAT, I can tell you that honestly, as a PA educator, I've been involved with admissions now for 28 years, that whatever tools PA educators are going to use to admit students, they're going to use. So I've read virtually all the research that PA educators have done on the GRE predictive factors in the PANS and success. And it's not strong, so it's not a great instrument. So I guess the comment I would make to all those students would be: do you want PA educators to use an instrument that's not very strong versus one that's going to be a better, identifier of students' success in the PA program? So there's nothing we can do to really allay their fears. It's going to be a process, but we'll get into that more detail as you ask questions. So.
Yeah. So is there, as of right now, with the standards we have, is there one factor in the application process that, through the research, you found to be the best predictor of success in a PA program?
You mean other than this instrument, right?
Right, like up until now, because the GRE is not. So what, is there something that, and that's what I find so looking at applications and talking to students, and I find it hard to help them to understand, like, schools have to standardize applicants to a degree because there's so much variety in where they're getting classes and experience. Like, there has to be some way to even the playing field a little bit. So what have schools used traditionally until this point to figure that out?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, they use science GPA a great deal. And we just got the data from the research phase for this project, which looks at several hundred students and their relationship to prerequisite science and the admission, like basically the first year of the PA program and the first year PACAT. And the relationship between those variables were very, very weak. And the published research shows that science GPA, which intuitively we would think that looking at EMP grades in a performance in chemistry would be the indicator, it hasn't panned out. I've done my own assessment, so I'm involved with a lot of assessment, and I've assessed several years of data looking at, here at Central, for example, looking at how well science GPA predicts PANS performance and the academic performance. And it's always a negative inverse relationship, which means that it's not strong. So PA educators are going to use that even though it's not a great predictor. Interviews, I think interpersonal things are also probably one of the more important things. Trying to identify that, using MMIs. We use, these group interviews, personal interviews. I think looking at personal statements are important. So there's like the qualitative, type of variables that programs will use. Then there's the quantitative, and then 51% of the PA programs as of last year were using GRE. So they're using GRE as part of that formula. So they're plugging that into a spreadsheet and saying, okay, here's the score in the GRE. We're going to give the student X number of points. So that's kind of what's happened. And it's not an exact science to admit students. And I'm the first to tell you that my whole career has been about student success, because I've worked with students who failed PANS. I've worked with students who failed, trying to remediate, trying to develop better remediation tools. And at the end of the day, not every student who applies is able to handle PA school. So it's our moral and ethical responsibility to not admit a student that's not going to be successful. So it's a tough job that we in PA education have. So yeah.
Okay, so what are the end points and end goals that the are you calling it the PACAT, right? I want to make sure I'm saying that right. That you're looking for with the PACAT.
The end goals?
Yeah.
Can you be more specific? You mean end goal variables?
Yeah. So is it seeing a better performance on PANTS, better GPAs in PA school, less loss of matriculation? Like what? I guess how do you figure out if it's effective?
I believe that the best way to find out if it's effective is to see a slight decrease in attrition.
Okay.
Whether a student gets, say, 450 on PANS or a 500 in PANS, I could care less. But the attrition rate in PA programs ranges from virtually zero in some that only accept students that are in the top, 10% of GPAs, to much higher in programs that are trying to admit candidates that come from disadvantaged backgrounds, those kinds of things. So if this tool at the end of the day lowers some attrition, then that will be successful. So it's really about student success. It's basically, to me, it's the best tool in the arsenal that will probably be available to programs to look at cognitive factors. Again, it's only one piece. So the other thing I'll say is that some programs that have a mission to admit students that might even get lower scores on this exam can still use this exam to try to identify those that need a pre-matriculation type of program as well. So it can have multiple uses. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. So can you even compare the PACAT to the GRE?
Not really, because it's testing different types of skills. It's a verbal, quantitative. I think there's some overlap with the quantitative, but because there's some statistics and there's some chemistry, et cetera. But for the most part, it's really testing, basic science knowledge, social science knowledge. It's most closely aligned with the pharmacy CAT. There's a pharmacy college admissions test. during the development phase, the committees looked at the pharmacy CAT because that was probably the closest aligned exam that that already existed. The MCAT, which has undergone some evolution, is also basically testing the same thing. So it's testing the typical undergraduate courses that PA students will already take. And it also is not assuming that students have very advanced, say, biological science courses. So it's not meant to look at like, well, you got to have, molecular biology, you have to have this and that. It's based on the average the average prerequisites of all PA students in the country. So we did a very large assessment of that to make sure that we're not over-testing content that's beyond the scope of what PA students are experiencing. So.
Okay. I listed out the subjects on my website. There's a lot of them, so I don't know if you want to list them, but we could either direct people there. If you want to go through them, you can. But I'd want to know a little bit more logistics of the test, like how long is it? How's it scored? That type of thing.
Okay. So first of all, how long is it? The exam is going to be 225 questions. Okay. And during the launch this year, 25 of those questions are going to be what's called field test questions. And up until like the NCCPA, for example, and I was a previous writer for NCCPA, so I know this stuff. Some of the questions in the PANS, when it was 360 questions, was field test questions. Only 300 questions were used to actually score it, and now it's only 300 questions. So 25 questions will be field test questions, and then the 200 questions will actually be scored. And it'll be based on the 1 minute per question, framework. As far as the scale, the scale process is very similar to what the PACAT uses. I'm not sure you're familiar with that. So you're using scaled scores, okay? And the scaled scores basically is all the students in the country. The lowest score might be 200. The top score might be 800. Actually, NCCPA uses the same concept. So you start with that framework. And then the students will find out where they score in terms of their percentile. So if they scored higher than 61% of all people, they'll be a 61. If they scored higher than 2% of the population, it'll be 2. So there'll be total scaled percentile scores and subscores, which we're combining the subscores, the biological sciences, A&P, chemistry, and social sciences.
Okay.
So
cool. Is there any, I guess, with it being so new, is there any way to give someone like, this is the score you should shoot for, that schools are going to be looking for, or we don't know yet?
Not yet. Excuse me. So it's gonna take probably several years to get to that point. And for example, I'll use the analogy of the PACAT, which has been used now for 20 years in PA education. There's research out there that looks at a score in the PACAT, and if the pre-PA people look my name up, they'll see that I've published stuff that I've looked at. But PACAT doesn't say this is the score for you. You research it, you look at the data. The same thing here. It's going to take time. Now, each year, applicants will be compared against the other applicants. So it's not going to be like, here's a score. Programs, on the other hand, just like they do now, will take that data and they'll begin to identify basically in their program how those scores relate to their performance. Because you can't generalize all PA programs. They're different in some ways. And they'll also look at the relationship of the PACAT with the PACAT in those programs, the EORs in that program, and then the PANS. So like any instrument, it'll take time to get to that point. The PACAT is being administered, or the psychometrician that we use is what's called a ROSH specialist. ROSH is kind of that framework where you're developing, a scale, and you're looking at basically performance within a group. So we're not looking at all the people who ever taken the exam. We're looking at the students in that year, in that testing window, who took the exam.
Okay. Do you see this? I know you said every school kind of uses their own parameters. I mean, do you see this as something that could potentially replace the GRE or become something that's mandated and required for every single PA school?
No admissions exam can be mandated unless the program wants to. Okay. So, I mean, I've been asked the question, does PAEA, for example, like condone or whatever? PAEA is neutral. Like PAEA doesn't say, well, GRE is better than MCAT versus, so programs are using GRE, Casper, and some programs are using MCAT even. So programs will choose to adopt this exam, and they'll choose to use it in their cycle and gather that data and require it for their applicants.
Okay, so it's something you're making available, and
it's available.
An option.
Yep.
Okay. I've seen it popping up a little bit that some programs are starting to implement the PACAT for this upcoming cycle. Is there a number of programs, or?
We're not going to know until May 1st.
Okay.
Really, the total number. There's estimated about a dozen, I think, right now are pretty sure, but there may be as many as another 10 to 15 beyond that, so it might be 25 or 30. So the first year, I think the expectation is that it might be 25 or 30 programs.
Yeah.
And then upcoming years, it's really going to be grassroots. I mean, as people use it, as the word spreads. I mean, I think all the PA educators in the country have heard about, this exam because there's been, like, for example, webinars that I've participated in and information given to all PA educators. So they know about it and they'll choose to select it. So I don't have a crystal ball to tell you what percentage of programs will use it in the future, but I think it'll probably grow.
Yeah, I agree. What is going to be the cost of the test? And then I know y'all have too, a lot of questions about cost and that being a limiting factor. Are there fee waivers available? What does that look like?
Okay. So let me get to the cost first. The cost of the actual exam is $149. When students register, they're also going to be paying the prometric testing fee at the same time. So it's important to realize that the total cost will be $228. It's comparable to the GRE. So that's the cost. As far as fee waivers, right now, Exam Master is developing a program to support economically disadvantaged students. So they're connecting with various constituency groups. I know that the executive director is talking to the president of APA, trying to reach out to see how that can be done. State chapters, and certainly that's the desire to, if students are challenged economically, to be able to have like a scholarship program and offer it free of charge. And I honestly don't know how much that's happening with the current exams, like, for example, GRE or Casper or whatever. But that's the intent of Exam Master, is to provide waivers.
Okay, and then how does it work? Will they be able to send their scores directly? Like, I know when you do the GRE, you get to send it to 3 schools at the test for free, and then you can send more later. Is it similar setup to that?
It is. So when students take the exam, so basically when they register, there'll be articulation with CASPA, and in which the number of programs they apply to, the CASPA would then forward the scores. It's a process that I can't tell you exactly how it's transmitted.
Gotcha.
But it'll be the same process that GRE uses. There's going to be a school code, and it'll be able to be available for candidates. There's going to be like a transcript too that each student can download of their exam, and programs will get transcripts of each applicants who applied their program. So yes, that's the way it's going to work.
Okay, cool. Okay, another question that I've gotten a little bit is people who have seen that these schools they're applying to want them to take the PACAT now, and they're unsure of how to prepare because, if you go, when I was studying for the GRE, I went to the library, checked out 5 books, took all these practice tests, so how can people actually study and prepare? And, we're all type A and need to be.
Of course. So am I. I understand that clearly. So first of all, I would say that preparation is not going to be necessarily as robust as looking at slide not preparing for GRE, because it's a different kind of exam. So students will get review books for that, and the more that you practice those exam questions, the better you will do. Test retest phenomenon. Because the exam is based upon the typical undergraduate courses, Exam Master now has a downloadable document, which is like the outline of the exam.
Okay.
So students can basically go to their own content that they have, their own, say for example, textbooks, and use that as a guide. So basically it's similar to that. Whether or not they want to, buy some more truncated, review manuals for biology and A&T, that's up to them. There's also going to be, as part of the payment, a free practice exam, which students will be able to go on and take. And that will give them an estimation of their scaled score. So if they go ahead and they take the practice exam and it says, well, you might score 450, which is lower, then that'll give them indication they're going to have to probably do a little more study. And I can tell you that the outline is fairly detailed as far as its taxonomy. They can go into chemistry and review the concepts. And I think that depending upon when students have taken some of the courses, I know that many students, by the time they get to their senior year and they're applying to PA school, it's been 3 years since they've taken inorganic chemistry. So that there may be topics they have to go back and maybe spend a little more time focusing on. But because the concentration of the exam is a little bit less for chemistry than, say, biology and animal physiology, it's not going to have as much of an impact on the scaled score as the other components.
Okay. So there are some guidance. Last time I checked the website, it wasn't up yet, but I'll link to that so everyone can find it and feel a little bit more reassured. But yeah, okay. I think we've pretty much covered all of my questions. Are there any other questions that y'all are getting regularly, or?
Let me run, because we're looking at blogs a little bit. And let me see if there's some concerns that have come up. I've got.
Y'all are on Instagram.
Yeah. Let's see. How heavily weighted will it be used in the application process? That is depending. That's the program's prerogative. I'll tell you that the programs that have adopted so far are using it as one component. So like I mentioned before about, say, let's say if you look at all the points, GPA, interview, essay, everything, healthcare experience, everything, and then you have the PACAT, that'll be counted as one of the variables. So like some programs might use the percentile and say students that get in this percentile will get X number of points. So whatever they choose to use. So that's kind of, so it's going to depend, how it's weighted. And some programs are doing a watch and see approach, meaning that because it's relatively new, they're going to gather it, they're going to analyze the data and see in their program how it's working. So, I think that process is always going to be kind of like a cautionary, like any new instrument. The other concern I've seen kind of crop up is it's being implemented under people's feet. Basically, is they're studying for the GRE, now they got to take the PACAT, and the process of putting a new requirement for an applicant, is based on like if it's early in the cycle, something like an exam is permissible to include, and that is like before it's like months before the application is due. That's kind of like how programs will look at it. They will put it on their website. That means that they're applying for that program. They'll know ahead of time. It's not like we're implementing a new class. So I think applicants have to realize that individual programs have the prerogative of requiring various kinds of elements for their students. So same thing here. And I think I've spoken to a few directors that are choosing to make it voluntary this year and kind of phasing it in.
Okay. Are any programs, do you think, going to require both the PACAT and the GRE, or is that overkill?
I don't know that to be sure. Everybody that I've spoken to and what I hear now in our committee is that they're choosing to basically go to PACAT and eliminate GRE. Okay. I personally eliminated GRE at Central 3 years ago. But again, I think the cost of students has to be concerning if you're requiring both exams. Yeah. So there was a comment, I think I covered this in terms of wanting to reduce attrition. There was one comment that says, well, the PAN scores are already high, why do you need another instrument? And I'm just going to go back to the one thing I said before is that if this instrument helps overall to reduce some attrition in PA students, then it's worth it. And so I think the message I would like to give to the pre-PA, the applicants is that this is about trying to ensure success. It's not about trying to eliminate people or, put more barriers for applicants. It's about ensuring that the people who are in programs have a higher probability of succeeding. And they also got to realize too is that when you take 5% to 10% attrition in programs across the United States, we're talking of hundreds of people that are being dismissed from programs across the country. So if that's lowered, it's worth it.
No, I completely agree. And I think sometimes too it's difficult from, say, a pre-PA standpoint when you haven't been to PA school yet, and even people who've been there. So my class, we started with 44, ended up with 40, and one person that graduated in my class never passed PANCE. And that's, I mean, it sounds small, 4 or 5 people, but for those people, that's life changing. And so, I think if there's something that could have prevented them or kind of indicated that maybe they weren't going to be able to succeed in PA school, that would have been helpful for them in the long run.
And I'll also add that many PA programs, myself included, will look at like any predictive variables where students might need more remediation along the way. So if you look at that, I mean, what some programs do is they look at applicants that get, say, lower scores in some classes, and they should intervene and say, okay, what do the students need? Do they need study skills? Do they need more support? Sometimes it's a number of things. Like again, having sat down with many students struggling in the first semester, sometimes it's just studying skills. And they have to adjust. But sometimes it's science knowledge and science aptitude, or the ability to handle the fast pace of a program. So even if it's looked at this way, is that if their score is lower in the programs and with the student, it kind of puts them on the radar that people need some support. Maybe they need some more intervention. And I know I brought up the concept of the pre-matriculation concept before. I mean, some medical schools do this. They admit candidates that have lower MCAT scores, and they come in and do a pre-matriculation review process. So I think it opens the door for some of those things too, not just well, I'm not going to admit you to the program because your score is X.
Yeah, just the more information, the better. I think that's great. Where can people find out more about the PACAT, ask their questions, all that good stuff?
Go to the PACAT website, PACAT.com. I feel like I'm in a commercial here.
There you go.
And I think the website's been built up pretty well now. I mean, the resources are up. I mean, they just have to kind of navigate. I think it's very user friendly. So, and that should answer a lot of questions that people have.
All right. Well, we'll definitely get them connected. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Okay. Have a good day.